Why has Florida State suddenly failed with the transfer portal?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So what in the world has happened? If there's anybody that has praised Mike Norvell and his staff more than me, when it comes to the portal, I haven't met that individual. I haven't read that individual's stuff or listened to that individual's podcast. I've said it over and over. Mike Norvell and his staff blend portal players with the current roster better than anybody. Until now. What happened? I started going through the numbers, and I saw it a little bit a couple of days ago, but then I started digging into DJ Uiagalei's statistics. And DJ Uiagalelei statistics are bad in general, but it makes it look worse with what I'm going to go through in a little bit, because some other guys with less experience are also transfer guys at other schools, even in the ACC, are playing at a much higher level. So the objective of this show is, simply put, why is Florida State suddenly struggling with the same thing that was a winning formula before? So I'm going to offer up a couple of things, and if people want to comment on this, obviously, I'm more than happy to see what you got to say. Post something on YouTube. Hit me up on X at the Locked On Seminoles handle, LO_Seminoles. I'm more than happy to listen to what people have to say. But these are my two main premises. Number one, they took too many guys that were looking out for themselves in some way, shape, or form. I'm talking about guys that were not on the roster in any way, shape, or form last year, sitting out, anything else. The guys they brought in from last year to this, in the whether it was December or May, whatever. Something's wrong there. And it's not talent that I'm necessarily talking about, although that can be part of it. I think the biggest aspect of it, and this is why it's so hard and why a lot of these guys make a lot of money, it's subjective to figure out, okay, player X at position Y will fit our culture because. That's not just a finite answer where 6 + 2 is 8. There are a lot of different moving parts there, and from day to day, it changes. No one human being's the same every day. But it's obvious that the chemistry is bad, and I'll give you a prime example. DJ throws a pass, and whether it's a money ball, whether he dirts it, or anywhere in between. Name a time when you looked at DJ, and they keep, quarterbacks are always on the TV screen. So if you didn't even go to see him play at Doak against BC or whatever, body language. Does he look comfortable to you? I don't think he does. And I'm talking about beginning of the game, before the score gets out of hand, before they're behind. I never thought DJ really looked that comfortable against Georgia Tech. Even the fourth down pass, and then another one on that drive where they tied it up. He didn't get the ball back. Great drive. But he never looked confident, even after he hit a couple of money balls. I mean, those were NFL throws. He still did. That's just one player. Again, I'll get into more stats with DJ in a little bit. But I really want to look at the defense here as an example. I mentioned these stats the other day on a pod, and I came back to them. Here are a handful of guys that have transferred to Florida State. And for whatever reason, it has or has not worked out. Keep in mind that their eligibility varies. This is it for them. Some are underclassmen, and I'll go into that a little bit too. But I can't find a pinpoint answer on this. So maybe it really is subjective. You tell me. Marvin Jones, he's got 2 tackles. He's got all the talent in the world. I saw him play in high school at American Heritage in Fort Lauderdale area. I've seen him play at Florida State. Didn't really play much at Georgia, which is kind of iffy. Like, why? Because they need, like everybody else, they need D linemen. But it hadn't worked at Florida State, but he's getting a lot of playing time. He's got another year of eligibility. Cam Riley comes over from Auburn. This is it for him, inside linebacker. He's one of the leaders in tackles, but he's not making a ton of impact plays. He's just kind of around the ball. He plays hard, but he's not a guy that's dominant. He's not good in coverage. He's just a guy in that regard, but it's a team sport. Defense is a little harder to calculate, especially in this era, but he's went against two teams that like to run the football straight ahead, and he hasn't been dominant, and he's got a lot of experience. Maybe they should play more young guys that are brought up through the system to the high school ranks. I don't know. But it'd be hard to take a guy off the field and have 17 tackles. So maybe that's one guy that's at least productive in some way, shape, or form. I'd like to see him make more run stuff, so like zeros and negatives, but that's another story. Devontae Brown moved from Miami to Florida State, switched from corner to safety, didn't play as much in the last game against BC, but at the same time, he just really hasn't been that productive. He's missed a few tackles. He's not good at that. I went over some of his PFF the other day. We got to tackle better as a unit is probably what the players got to be saying to themselves all the time. Brown's an example of that, but they haven't been challenged in coverage much, so I can't say a whole lot about that. The guy that I went all in on, he transferred last year, had to sit out over that stupid rule. The NCAA is so bizarre. Daryl Jackson. He's from the greater Tallahassee area. He played high school ball with Joshua Farmer. He's been around the ball a ton, but he just doesn't finish plays. Like he looked better when he was at Miami than he does now with the Noles. Like that is bizarre. I mean, it's not like Odell Higgins forgot how to coach. He's a Hall of Fame assistant. It's really not debatable. So how does that happen? Is there a culture thing there? Is there something else? I don't know. Earl Little comes in. He wins the job. The guy that has the job transfers out to Southern Cal at nickel. That's a hard position. He's got 2 tackles, has really not been that impactful. And that's a guy that won the job pretty quickly in the spring. So, why would it be good early in the year for the way he's performing? And hey, he's our guy. You lose Freedy Vance. What's going on? It's just bizarre that guys that had proven themselves before, or at least were elite recruits, and there was so much expectation in the starting lineup, etc., and they're not getting it done. So I brought up just culture in general, and there's another point that needs to be brought up, and this was something that came up on the live streams that I did a couple nights ago, back-to-back nights, Monday and Tuesday. So I'll just reiterate this. Many people, without me asking, without me bringing it up, said, Brian, NIL is a big problem. I don't know how people would know the exact numbers. I would project they're assuming, and I'm assuming they're assuming, but I know they don't have the contracts in front of them. But with NIL, you're going to have good and you're going to have bad. I've had numerous conversations about the NIL issues at different schools. Really haven't talked a ton about it at Florida State, but I'm about to. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we're having something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. And if that's not enough, FanDuel also has something special for listeners this weekend. Be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all Sunday 9-8 pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Friday, 9/6. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Visit FanDuel.com to look up odds all the way through this Sunday. Check it out, FanDuel.com. All right. I haven't talked much about my speculation with Florida State's NIL. That's not really my bag as a general rule. But at the same time, I think it's time to speculate a little bit on my own. And again, like everybody else, I don't have the contracts in front of me. But just using logic in following college football for the vast majority of my life, in some way, shape, or form, from program to program, Midwest, Southwest, everywhere, chemistry is as important as anything. And it's probably the sport with the most importance on chemistry because you got so many guys on a roster. With the walk-ons included, teams are over 100 players. So if you have a couple people in a locker room in some way, shape, or form that cause problems by coming late to meetings or anything else, it's always been an issue. Well, now we have NIL. What does that mean? If you go back and you look at the NIL that was rumored to be going around with Florida State, some of it good, some of it bad, players not happy, a certain running back left, he got bad advice. Part of it was through his parents, I'll leave that alone. But there was a lot of guys that were on the fence. There's rumors about the D linemen getting paid and now they're not producing. They didn't put in effort. You at least have to look at it. Anybody that doesn't believe it's not a quote unquote factor, why? It's not uncommon. Think about the NFL. Guy goes out, balls out, earns that second contract. That's where you get your best money. Goes to another team, re-signs, whatever. What happens? It's one of two ways. He's got the dog in him, and that individual goes out and performs at a high level. Or number two, that individual goes out, it is pretty good, but is he truly a top of the board player that earned his free agent money? And in this particular case, for the relationship standpoint between what's going on at Florida State, the answer would be no. Players, and I'm not going to get into specifics here on the ones, but there's a lot of rumors about guys that got some money and all of a sudden they're not playing as well. So now another question for those listening to this pod. How in the world do you stop that? You're talking about dealing with human emotion after they've got cash in their pocket. That money changes people, man. It's not a news flash. We talk about it all the time in society. You can take football and throw it out. How many people do you know that whether they got the big job promotion, got a retirement fund that hit because somebody in their family passed and they got part of their retirement, or maybe they got hit on a lottery ticket, even if it was just $50K. Whatever it is, lump sums of money often changes an attitude for the worse. I know this personally. I have some family members that are so wealthy, it's insane. People I don't know real well, and for the most part, don't want to be around them. One of which has passed away, was one of the most miserable individuals I've ever been around. Real smart, had a lot of money, but she was miserable to be around. Didn't care how much money she spent on me or anybody else around me. She was no fun. That's kind of what it seems like right now with Florida State's football team. These guys don't look like they're having fun. Again, I mentioned earlier, DJ looked like glossed over. I even heard Danny Cannell talking about that on the Cover 3 podcast. Obviously, Cannell played at Florida State. He's a huge Noles fan. He's an alum, played in the NFL. He knows quarterback play, played for the Giants. Yeah, and the Broncos. I don't think he's going to miss on that either. And I've heard people say that in my live chat too. Got a pro player and a former Noles says it. I study him. I've studied him since he went to Clemson. I think it. And you also have fans at Florida State watching it saying the same thing. But it doesn't stop there. Name somebody on defense that looks like they're happy, even when they do get like a 3 and out or 4 or 5 play drive and force a punt. They're just kind of going through the motions. Is it NIL? And some of these guys don't like each other anymore? I'm guessing right now, but like it has to be a factor in some capacity. And you can't just tell me they're not practicing well. All those things go into it. But there's something missing that is a mental aspect of a locker room and a team. I think NIL is a part of it. I am not, before anybody just throws bricks at this podcast, saying I have all the answers. I certainly do not. If I did, I'd be on the phone now because I got to cover this. I'd rather they be winning. Let me tell you, it's a lot more fun to do this podcast if Florida State is 2-0 in the national top 10. It's not competitive. Y'all be happier, so would I. But that's not reality. And I call it like I see it. So if it's not NIL, what would it be for those? And I'm sure there'll be somebody that comments, oh, it can't be. Florida State's not it has nothing to do with Florida State. NIL is here to stay for those that hate NIL and say it shouldn't be a part of it. That's not the way it works. And there are some of you out there, you've commented, and there are also those that think that some of the guys are just getting too much. Without the numbers, I don't know how people say that because I don't even have them. But at the same time, it is what it is. Before I go on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about DJ, then finish up on the show about 3 quarterbacks that transferred, because all these transfer guys, it seems to be the biggest problem. But I just want one last main statement. Did anybody think that Norvell and his staff had an idea this was coming? I don't. I mentioned this the other day, and I am steadfast in it now. I was pretty sure then. I'm positive now. Think back to his end of camp press conference, and then he did that show with the FSU media guy. He does a great job at the local restaurant. If you go back and look at those shows, real positive, like even for Mike, and who's obviously a very positive man, he was giddy. You can usually tell with people like that wear the emotions on their sleeves if something's wrong. They can try to hide, but it's really hard for them. That's not Mike's style anyway. He's pretty forthright. So I don't think I'm the only one questioning this stuff. And NIL, I know it's just a part of this problem. Practice habits I've talked about, not having the right personnel and stuff. I'll get into more of that this week. And I'm actually going to do a podcast with Alex Dono later today to get his opinion. I'm going to talk to Larry Bluestein, just other people that have watched Florida State that I've been texting with. We're all texting like, what is going on here? A couple of my other friends that watch Florida State, I had a buddy of mine call, he goes, what is wrong with Florida State? Everybody, whether they follow it or not, are just completely puzzled. I haven't had one person have a definitive answer, not one. So before I go on, one last comment here. Bud Elliott brought about a little bit of this stuff in fall camp. He was concerned about receiver in particular, and they certainly haven't lived up to expectation. But he also said something else that was pretty obvious. He was talking about the game against Georgia. He didn't think that Florida State would have went on the portal for this season if they'd have had a chance to go to the playoff, even if they got beaten. But it was almost like we had to vindicate what we did last year. I think that's an interesting topic. I haven't talked to Bud about that. I haven't had a chance to have a sit down with him since he made that statement on one of his recent Nolecasts, but it's an interesting topic. When we come back here in a minute, I'm going to talk more about the quarterbacks in the ACC. But here's the stat line to give you a taste. This is a transfer again, DJ, first year, but this is his 5th year of college football. This is another transfer. Just doesn't seem to be getting it. And oh, he had to make some money on NIL, but he seems like a pretty good guy. I don't think he's any kind of mercenary. He's 40-69, 58%. Obviously, that's pedestrian. 465 yards, 6.7 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But here are the more detailed stats from Pro Football Focus. His offensive rating against Georgia Tech, 68.2. Against BC, 72.6. I think that's a little skewed because he added up some numbers there in the fourth quarter. Passer rating of only 67 against Georgia Tech. He was 3 out of 8 overall in those 2 games on passes over 20 yards. He does have 3 big-time throws, meaning they're more difficult, smaller area, like a corner ball, like that deep one on the flea flicker. It was a really nice pass. That's not bad. But here's the thing that is bizarre. Historically, he's really good with play action and hitting like a critical play. For Florida State this year, this is brutal. He's like 52.2%, 12 out of 23, and 166 yards. He's hit a couple of shots. I'll give you that. But he should be at a higher rate than that. Like nothing that he does is comfortable. It's just incredible. By the way, this stat is just in a bonus I came across by accident with him. DJ has had 20.8% of his short throws dropped, according to Pro Football Focus. Bud was definitely right about the receivers, and I overhyped him. I'll have to give Bud credit on that. When we come back, we're going to talk about the guys at quarterback that have made the transition to other schools and hit. I'm going to speculate a little bit about why that is and why Florida State needs to kind of follow that path in the future. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. Did you know that 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for their hiring purposes? LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that are right for your business, no matter what it is. It could be somebody that has a dog cleaning business. It could be somebody that has just a bunch of vacuum cleaners and some washers and stuff like that. whatever they're trying to sell is a side business. You can find somebody to help you in the sales business with that. Does not matter. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're not looking in the right place. LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Put your job up for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So why are other teams bringing in transfer quarterbacks and they're hitting, even ones without hardly any experience? I used 3 different guys to kind of go over this. And to be honest with you, it's a little puzzling. One of them has 1 year starting experience. The other 2 really didn't play much at all. Kyle McCord at Syracuse doesn't have tons of talent around him. And I know they played Ohio last week, but you couldn't have told me this was going to happen because I'm not a big Kyle McCord guy. He was 27 of 39, 69.2%, 9.1 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Now, their defense is terrible. He had to throw it around a little bit, but he still did a pretty good job. I'll give him credit. Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein transferred in from Alabama. Didn't play at Bama. I've seen him before, know the kid. He's got a cannon, but I always thought he was a little erratic. Well, he wasn't erratic for Pittsburgh this last weekend. 30 of 40, 75%, 336 yards, 8.4 per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Pittsburgh, not exactly the most dynamic area for wide receivers. They'll have a guy usually, but nothing special. Finally, going against Elon, which I know is not great, but Malik Murphy barely played at Texas. This is his 3rd year. He's a 6'6" guy that's got all the size and tools, 100%. But it was more about upside. He hadn't proven anything yet. He just barely played for Sarkisian at Texas. He hit on PFF rankings, 75.5% as an offensive player, carrying out play action, etc. Passing rating, 74.8. That's pretty good. The only thing he struggled with, this is kind of surprising because he's got a huge arm. He's 1 for 11 on deep shots, 20+ yards. So that's a little surprising. But unlike DJ, which this is what DJ and him are very similar style players, he's 7 out of 9 on play action. It's bizarre. Overall, Murphy is 26 of 40, 65%, 290 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns and a pick. For a guy with hardly any experience at all, Murphy's pretty good. Now, that brings up my next point. If you believe in yourself as a coaching staff, and I'm pretty sure Florida State's got some confident guys, why did they go with DJ Uiagalelei? This is just an open-ended question here. Murphy has as much talent as any quarterback in the country that's a pocket guy. I'm going to guess he's 240, something like that now. He's put together, big man. He's from the greater Los Angeles area. If you can truly trust in yourself to coach up a guy, why did you go with DJ? I don't know what it is. Maybe they wanted to figure something out and get it done early, and they knew that was going to be the guy. Maybe they just didn't have a connection to Malik Murphy or some of these other guys. I mean, Malik went to Duke. Like, if you can't beat Duke out for a transfer, that's concerning. So what's the deal? I think that from now on, if you're going to take a transfer quarterback, or really any guy, it needs to be a person who has something to prove. If you're going to go out and spend money in the portal on a guy, be a quarterback or anything else, he still needs to prove something, meaning he's coming off a good season, but to get to where he wants to be in the NFL draft, no shortage on the next point. It is imperative that he has a great final season. Not just pretty good or whatever, because he's got a great track record. Give me the guy that needs the motivation to be great because of the money at the next level. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get something from NIL. I'm not saying that. But the priority for him is getting developed, and he openly and unsolicited talks about that when you meet with him. If you talk to a guy and the first and last thing is about money, 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 hit the door. I've heard this with other programs too, and I don't even think Florida State's by far the worst. I think they've got a few NIL problems if I was to guess, but there's still some other programs that I think it's going to be worse. We'll see how that goes. But with that in mind, I think NIL is a problem with the portal. Florida State needs to be more careful. And that's what I've learned. So with the original question, what has happened with Florida State in the transfer portal? Why can't they do it the way they did? I think they picked some guys that they thought were home runs, probably paid a little bit, and they weren't necessarily motivated. Something's not right there. Maybe some of it's fit and whatnot too, but I think NIL is a big part of this problem. Please like this podcast. Please share it. Please rate and review. And again, please comment on YouTube. Love to hear what you got to say. And after you get done seeing this podcast, check out Locked On ACC and Locked On College Football. All my guy friends over there, they're getting it done. And there's a lot of stuff about NIL, ironically, especially on the Locked On College Football podcast, because Lord only knows Spencer's got a lot of stuff going on there. Everybody have a great one. I will see you tomorrow.